Plaza, the chat in the Plaza, and today we are very privileged to have a social protection champion, a social protection advocate, and especially in the August House, Honorable Flavia Kabahenda Rwabuhoro. Honorable Flavia, you're very, very welcome. We are very privileged to have you on the show today, and I will let you introduce yourself a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I'm delighted to be invited here and hosted to the Social Protection Plaza. And I feel very encouraged and empowered to continue to discuss a topic of my passion. And so while here, I think we shall be discussing a number of issues on the journey we have really trekked since we started this advocacy campaign on social protection and where we are at, and also what best thing we can do for the country on issues of social protection, and especially building a system that will cater for it.
So from your own assessment, as someone who has been very keen on social protection, how would you describe our current status of social protection in this country?
Well, the current status of social protection in the country should come from how we define the aspects of social protection. Because the whole essence of social protection is about reducing vulnerability and addressing people's needs as they fall into shock, both financial, social, and other, and economic. And so in that regard, I think the definition of those particular aspects give us the best and appropriate shock response. So we need to understand who is the vulnerable person. Because if I may just take a recent example, that before COVID, the people we thought were vulnerable are not the ones that showed up as vulnerable during COVID. Because these poor people who we thought were in their gardens and digging all day, we thought those were the poor that we needed to address. But COVID showed us that any one of us can fall into poverty. And that is any time. You can be rich now, but tomorrow you may not. People lost employment, people lost jobs, people lost opportunities, people lost money, and up to now, they are languishing even more than those who keep in the gardens. Because the poor people had food. For them, they did not even see a difference in their lifestyles, because their lifestyle is to be in their gardens, to be at home with their children, to take their children to low-level schools. But for these guys who used to drive home on Christmas with huge cars, having jobs, having money, they are the people now crying for government to support. Meaning that the social protection status in the country requires that we redefine the specific aspects of social protection, so that we widen the base and we widen even the targeting, and then that requires that we build a system. I'm glad that as we talk, we have a national social protection system, national social protection policy that tried to put together a number of interventions that seemed to be fragmented at that time, and to make sure that they cause duty to those who bear it, and that they cause interventions to those who actually should benefit from the interventions. But it has not been funded, and therefore it may not work for as long as it's not going to be funded, because the ministry that hosts the National Social Protection Policy and the National Social Protection Interventions is the one that is perennially underfunded. Every time there is a budget cut in this country, it will first go to Ministry of Gender before it goes in. And even then, even at the budget reading, you can see that Ministry of Gender was the third last in the percentage to GDP. And for us, that worries us. And it makes the status of social protection worrying for us, that we may have to continue with the advocacy campaign. Because it seems like we may not be on the same page with some of the policymakers. We may not be on the same page with the national planning of this country, and therefore our advocacy agenda requires that we continue to create awareness to the policymakers, the planning team, the planning authority, and also the planning team of the Ministry of Finance to start looking at social protection financing as actually an investment and not just an expenditure or a recurrent like the way they treat others. And so this status, we are glad that we have a policy, and for us, the policy is a beginning point, we should appreciate. We are glad that a few interventions are being made of social protection, although they are still fragmented. We need to synergize them and have one common direction to social protection for all and not for some. Because as a developing country, we have been supported for social protection by a number of donors. Most of the financing seems to come from government partners. And development partners may not necessarily want to support long-term social protection aspects. For them, they fund projects, and for us as a country, we need to sit down so that whatever project is funded is feeding into our system planning. So I think in that way, we need to realign, redefine, and redirect our interventions in social protection.
Talking about the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on social protection, when do you start? What exactly have you achieved, and what have been the major challenges?
You see, it was 2010, and that time I was sitting on the Committee of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Actually, I was the Vice Chairperson. And then the introduction of this SAGE came about. But of course, earlier on, there had been the NUSAVs, there had been the Northern, PRDP, there had been all those other Ruero Menzori. But it had not come to our mind as policymakers that these were social protection interventions. So when SAGE came, and they were introducing it to us as a committee before they could introduce it to the bigger parliament, we had a number of questions on why government was choosing to support these older persons, whether it was not making them lazy so that they eat all their money and they wait on government to give them free money at the end of the day. So I think I was one of the people who had like 1,000 questions that could not be answered. And I want to thank the Ministry of Gender because after failing to answer my questions, they sent me for a training to South Africa, Cape Town, for about 2 weeks, and then this week, so that I get to understand this issue of social protection, go to its bottom, and then to appreciate that these interventions are made to reduce vulnerabilities and build resilience for our people. And for the older persons, of course, they needed the support. So from there, with the team that I've gone with, because they sent me with a number of ministers, I think there were like 7 ministers, I was the only MP, but of course being Vice Chairperson, they thought they would answer my questions in there. So when we came back, I thought I should make the whole Parliament understand this issue of SAGE and then social protection and the other interventions, bring it together. And so I took the role of founding the Uganda Parliamentary Social Protection Forum, so that a number of members will become members there, and then we can do the discussion on social protection, on SAGE, and then the other interventions. So that is how we found the forum in Parliament, so that we make this a political commitment other than just these technical interventions. For us, we wanted to make a political voice on the whole aspect of social protection. So we had a lot of members appreciated, we moved. SAGE was being implemented and the other NUSAs without a policy. So the first thing for us to notice and observe was that, but we don't have a policy. So how do we allocate government money to an intervention that has no policy about it? So we quickly went into the development of the policy with the Ministry of Gender, and I'm glad the policy is out. That is our achievement. Secondly, government was sluggish on its counterpart fund. Yes. Because the development partners were all in, and they would put in their money, and then every other financial year's budget, the contribution of government would not come by. And so we had to enhance our voice.
Maybe a little bit on that, the arrangement between the state but probably that will, we're going to take a short break, and then when we return, we will start right there to explain how this arrangement between the state and the development partner